الإمام سهل بن سعد رضي الله عنه قال: جاء جبريل عليه السلام إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال: يا محمد، عش ما شئت فإنك ميت، وأحبب من شئت فإنك مفارقه، واعمل ما شئت فإنك مجزي به، واعلم أن شرف المؤمن قيامه بالليل وعزه استغناؤه عن الناس. Today's hadith is found in the collection of Imam al-Tabarani, narrated to us with an acceptable chain of narration, narrated by Sahal bin Sa'd radiallahu anhu, where he says that Jibreel alayhi salam came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he said, Ya Muhammad, live however you want, but in the end you will die, and love whoever you want, but in the end you will be separated from them, and do whatever you want, but in the end you will be accountable for everything. And know, Ya Muhammad, that the honor of a Muslim is his praying in the night, and his dignity is being independent of others. This is a very, very beautiful hadith, and in this hadith we see 5 pieces of advice given by the best of angels, Jibreel alayhi salam, to the best of human beings, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And we'll talk about each piece of advice in a bit more detail. The first piece of advice that Jibreel alayhi salam gave the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, Ya Muhammad, live however you want, but in the end you will die. This means that no matter how long you live, or no matter what you do in your life, in the end, death is written upon every soul. And that's why a Muslim is a person who understands that everything in this dunya is temporary, and that's why he prepares himself or herself for their departure from this dunya. And like some scholars used to say, تذكر أن كل لذة دون الجنة فانية وكل بلاء دون النار عافية. Remember that every blessing, every pleasure in this dunya other than Jannah is temporary, and every disaster, every calamity, every difficulty other than Jahannam is a blessing. Everybody returns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after they die, but a Muslim or a smart person is a person who returns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before they die. And the second piece of advice that Jibreel alayhi salam gave the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, أحبب من شئت فإنك مفارقه. Love whoever you want, but in the end you will be separated from them. You can love whoever you want, any person on earth. In the end you will be separated from them. This is just the reality of this world. And this piece of advice doesn't just apply to people, also applies to the materialistic things in life. You can love your wealth, you can love your job, you can love your position. In the end, you will leave it all behind. And that's why a smart person is a person who fixes their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or prioritizes their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So fix your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah will fix everything that is around you. And the third piece of advice that Jibreel alayhi salam gave the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, do whatever you want, but in the end you will be accountable for it all. One day you will stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you will answer for every single little thing that you did, and you will be accountable for it all. But you'll also be accountable in this dunya. Be careful how you treat others and how you carry yourself, because the way you treat others today will come back tomorrow, if not in this dunya, then in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the fourth piece of advice that Jibreel alayhi salam gave the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ شَرَفَ الْمُؤْمِنِ قِيَامُهُ بِاللَّيْلِ. Know, Ya Muhammad, that the honor of a Muslim is praying in the night. And there's a lot to be said about all of these pieces of advice, but specifically this one. Inshallah, we'll make the khatera next week about this piece of advice specifically. But wallahi, there's nobody on this earth that is happier than a person who got out of bed to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then went back to sleep. And wallahi, no matter how hard you try to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the middle of the night, you won't be able to unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you permission to do so. And this is one of the biggest blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give you. This is a time of forgiveness, a time of mercy, and a time of answered prayers. So don't miss out on these rewards. And know that it is one of the rules of our religion, that the nature of the reward is the same as the nature of the deed. The nature of the reward is the same as the nature of the deed. In Arabic, it's al-jaza'u min jins al-amal. So our good deeds that are done out in the open, for example, in front of the eyes of people. For example, praying in the masjid. Right now, we all prayed Isha. You saw me pray. I saw you pray. We all saw each other pray. And this is something that you can't avoid. So these types of good deeds, like praying in the masjid and others, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us about their rewards. But the good deeds that you do in secret, away from the eyes of people. And the biggest example of this is praying in the night. When you get up to pray, no one knows that you got up. No one knows, did you stay up praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or did you stay up doing something else? And these types of good deeds, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept the reward for them a secret as well. And that's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about praying in the night in the Quran, He said, فَلَا تَعْلَمُ نَفْسٌ مَا أُخْفِيَ لَهُم مِّن قُرَّةِ أَعْيُنٍ جَزَاءً بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. That no soul can begin to imagine the amount of reward that is waiting for them or stored for them based on what they used to do. And the fifth and final piece of advice that Jibreel alayhi salam gave the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ شَرَفَ الْمُؤْمِنِ قِيَامُهُ بِاللَّيْلِ وَعِزَّهُ اسْتِغْنَاؤُهُ عَنِ النَّاسِ. Know that the dignity of a believer is being independent of others. And this just means the less you can rely on others, and the more that you can rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the better. I hope that was a benefit, inshallah. يروي الإمام الطبراني بسند حسن عن سهل بن سعد رضي الله عنه قال: جاء جبريل عليه السلام إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال يا محمد عش ما شئت فإنك ميت، وأحبب من شئت فإنك مفارقه، واعمل ما شئت فإنك مجزي به، واعلم أن شرف المؤمن قيامه بالليل وعزه استغناؤه عن الناس. صدق رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، والحمد لله رب العالمين. Inshallah, we have a couple of announcements. Assalamu alaikum. If I could